Today on the Neo Marketing Podcast, we're going to talk about civility and decency as a critical component to crisis communication.
Oh, I like this. I like it a lot.
Welcome to the Golding Group Neo Marketing Podcast, a bi-weekly discussion of best practices, latest trends, and modern techniques for professional business communication, including advertising, marketing, digital channels, social media, public relations, and alternative options.
Kyle, how goes it, sir?
Fantastic. Happy to be back on the podcast with you, Pritch.
Absolutely. Kyle Golding, of course. The big guy, the big kahuna, the leader. Anyway, it's good to be here, Kyle. You can cut all that out if you want. It's all right. So I'm seeing this is new thinking.
Okay.
So not finally evaluated data, as the intelligence folks used to always say.
Okay.
All right. And something that I'm going to continue to pull the string on, hopefully, in another podcast we'll have the next iteration. But I'm starting to see professionals, the public relations professionals, Helio, Garcia, Jim Lukaszewski in particular, starting to think about decency and civility as a critical component of crisis communication.
Okay, well, those are big concepts.
Big concepts. We'll try and peel them back, maybe a little bit at a time, so It's not so painful.
Okay, well, that sounds like an interesting conversation.
Well, I hope so. I found this article. He has a newsletter that comes out, and a recent one had what I think is a great quote to kind of set the table. He says, "I believe all questionable, inappropriate, unethical, unconscionable, immoral, predatory, improper, victim-producing, and criminal behaviors are intentional."
Negatives. Okay.
Then he goes on to say, "I believe all ethical, moral, compassionate, decent, civil, and lawful behaviors are also intentional."
Opposite end of the spectrum.
Absolutely. And then he wraps this all up with a nice little bow that says, "The choice is always clear and always yours."
Oh, very distinct and decisive in what he is trying to communicate there. You cannot miss the point.
Absolutely.
Right?
You can't miss it.
There it is. That is the point, right? You can't miss it. You know what you're doing. You know if you're doing bad. You know if you're doing good.
Well, and yes, exactly. And again, choice is there. It's yours. It's always clear,
Sure.
He says. Well, he goes on, and this is where the thinking...
Well, now, let me just play a little devil's advocate there, though.
All right.
There's got to be a 50% mark, right? If we're going to give the negative side, 1%, and we're going to give the positive side 100%, there's got to be a 50, 49, 49 scenario.
No, I think Jim,
where it gets a little grayish.
Jim is black and white, and I absolutely agree.
Okay.
I absolutely agree. As a crisis communicator, you're not going, okay, well, I'm going to do something that is harmful, or I'm going to do something that is immoral or illegal.
Probably more likely you're going to not do something, and that lack of action is harmful or is negative in some way, as opposed to actively trying to be negative.
Right.
But plenty of people will tell you in some sort of stereotypical, I saw it in a movie once, that PR, that hateful word that you hate in the PR world, that 4-letter word spin, that spin is obfuscating and lying and misdirection and all kinds of things that you and I, and any professional listening to this podcast would call negatives or bad business. So people would say, don't you do that in business? And do you know it's bad and do it anyways, or do you not realize it's bad?
Well, and then I think for a little bit more context, it's not the public relations person or the communicator or the marketer that's doing this. It's something organizational.
Yeah, it is usually someone else in the organization who their focus is in the wrong place.
Absolutely.
That's an easy way to sum up that.
Yeah, exactly. So, but again, it's there. It's a choice. It's yours, and it's always evident. So
I agree with that.
Okay.
I do agree with that. Like I say, I think some people can make the argument for a 50% gray area, but at the end of the day, you know what's right, And if you don't know what's right, I don't know how you got your job to begin with. I don't know
Right,
how you got to be
exactly.
a functioning adult.
Absolutely.
If you don't know the distinction between the two.
Well, here's the thing that got my thinking going, and again, this is a kind of an inside look at academics versus professionals.
Right.
I straddle the line.
There you go.
And did for many years. But the academics, and I know there's a lot of work being done in crisis comm, but they're looking for best responses, the impact of prior reputation.
Right.
They're looking to expand the model for response. They're still talking about plans. I just want to slap them silly. But
Protocols, folks, protocols.
protocols, right? But the practical, Helio, Fred Garcia in particular, and Jim Lukaszewski in particular, are now looking at the impact of civility and decency in the crisis communication framework.
Okay.
And the thing that really got me thinking about this was Jim laid down a Lexicon of Civility and Decency. And it's a fairly decent list of words. He said the true test of civility is a commitment to communication and actions that benefits the recipient more than the sender.
Oh, I like that a lot. You know how I
Absolutely.
feel about putting the other party in front of you as far as who it benefits. I completely agree with that.
Well, and so his
And it does, but it's not like at your peril. Like it's not 100% them, 0 you. It could be that 51-49.
Yeah.
But you still need to be putting the audience first.
Absolutely.
And then whatever it takes to make it right on the backside, whether it's in communication, whether it's actual processes in your business, whatever the change needed to fix the situation, you have to. The onus is giving the audience what they need, what they deserve, and what they expect, and then you figuring out how to do it.
Well, and then again, the background where Jim Lukaszewski's coming from, and he said this for decades, a victim is anybody who thinks they are
That
a victim.
perception is reality.
Absolutely. So, but I thought this lexicon would be very helpful to think about, the impact of words,
Yes.
the impact of the vocabulary. And I scratched my head at first until I thought about it a little bit more. And this list of words that he's got is going to continue adding to it, are the kinds of words that can actually have that effect and insert decency and civility into the crisis response. So it goes way beyond the reputation of the organization. It enters even further into the helping of the victims of a crisis, right? Check it out. Words like character, charitability, decency, courtesy, dignity, accountability, politeness, pleasantness, patience. I mean, if you just think about those words and make sure that you're using those words in your crisis response, you've taken a greater step into helping those who've been harmed or potentially harmed.
And I think as an added bonus, by slowing down, because we've talked about that before, slowing down, thinking before you don't have to just blurt out of your mouth, thinking, and then working through this process of am I being polite, am I being thoughtful, am I being beneficial, all of these positives. If you get that in your thought process, what actually you write down or you type in your keyboard or when you say out of your mouth will be the right thing if you slow down, take your time, and your focus and your why is correct.
And he calls those words the pathway to civility and decency, and I agree.
Yeah,
I absolutely
the
agree.
pathway is an excellent word because it's not the end or the answer. It's that process. It's starting that, getting you in the right mindset, in the right way, on the right path, and where you end up is a combination of all kinds of things.
Yeah,
This
absolutely.
is how you start to get in the right way.
Right.
If you start wrong, right? If you start with we're not going to be honest, if you start with we're not going to do these positives, but we'll take the negative route because we're covering our own butt, if you will.
Right.
Then wherever you end up is going to be bad. It's going to backfire on you. It's going to fail because you started your path wrong.
Right.
So
exactly.
that the pathway is a great word there.
Absolutely. And he says, the opposite of all of those good words on the list is trouble. It's delayed mitigation. It prolongs the problem. It victimizes those already victimized. So if you go back to before I started thinking about this particular aspect, I thought about the perfect response, which is, to help the victims. I mean, we've talked a lot about all of those things, and all of those things still stand.
Right.
But when you add this dimension, you're doing even more good. You're building your reputation, although that's not the object of it. You're bettering the people who've been victimized or potentially victimized.
But there's nothing wrong with getting benefit of doing things in the right way.
Not at all.
So you're right. The intent isn't, we're going to sell more widgets next week if we handle this crisis correctly. But if you do handle the crisis correctly, if you and the company and the leadership and everyone is like, we're going to do the right thing for the right reasons, we start in the right place, we take ourselves down that pathway, we do the right actions for the right reasons, then if people have a better, or at least a view that they had of the brand before, or even better, because they think that you handled the crisis correctly, there's no shame in you might sell more widgets.
Exactly.
But it's not the intent.
No. That's the bonus.
That's the difference between PR and marketing.
That's an intended consequence that hopefully will follow.
It's another reason when people simply say, why not take the easy route and do this, but take what we're saying is the harder route because we're putting the audience first, but we want to end up in this positive light. And it's because you earn respect. You earn their admiration and the relationship where they eventually buy your widget or whatever it is you're trying to do.
And the most important word, trust.
Absolutely.
They trust you.
No one ever was mad at someone who they trust.
Right. And who did the right thing.
Right. But they will get mad at you if you break that trust.
Right. Absolutely.
No one appreciates that. So everyone appreciates someone they feel they can trust. No one appreciates someone who's untrustworthy.
Absolutely.
And here is the process of always making sure you're on that positive side instead of that negative side. Because it only takes, I say this to a lot of people too, you can have 100 years of a brand or 100 years of great work in a community, a reputation, all of that can be 100% spotless. And one bad day, I went straight to the pure negative side, and I took the shortest shortcut, and I cut everyone off at the knees, and everyone saw it, and erased 100 years of a brand overnight.
Right, absolutely. It takes 10 years to build a reputation and 1 second to destroy
Easily.
it.
Which is also why, folks, here's a bonus tip. Folks, I'm adamant about this. Stop letting your interns run your social media. Are you kidding me? Because it's something simple, maybe even just a mistyped word, but it's not having the right intent because they don't have the right training, they don't have the right experience, they don't understand the brand the way someone else higher in the food chain with more experience with the brand, more understanding of this communication process, they're going to do a better job of communicating. Putting the intern on social media is the same thing as putting your interns in front of the camera, TV camera, when the local news station shows up and says they heard there's a problem here. You would not run your intern out in front of the camera.
Exactly.
So why do you let them run your social media when you know damn good and well that the easiest way to get yourself canceled is one bad tweet?
Right.
And then, even if you take it back, even if you respond to that crisis correctly, the lie is around the world before the truth puts its pants on, right?
Exactly
it doesn't matter what your response is. The intern can kill a brand on social media with a single tweet. So why are people letting them run it?
That's become such an essential tool.
Exactly.
So, don't put a loaded
it's an
gun
essential tool,
in
so
the hand
do
of
it
a child. Right,
do
exactly.
It right. Yes.
Absolutely. And don't leave your account open so your toddler can get to it.
Yeah.
U.S. Strategic Command. You remember that tweet? It was
Yes.
gobbledygook, and some folks thought that was,
like
the
It's
code.
a sign.
We're going. Right. And unfortunately, it was the person responsible for social media left their account open, and her toddler did a little typing.
Amazing.
Anyway. I want to go back to this kind of thinking and take a look at that classic, excellent example of Johnson & Johnson in the 80s. Right? They did the right thing. It cost them a ton of money, but they were trustworthy for a number of years.
They put the public first.
Absolutely.
They did take the financial ding and had to figure out later how to deal with it, but they put the public first. They were honest and upfront, and they built a much better reputation on the backside of that than they had going in to a situation that was 100% not their fault.
Not their fault.
They could have easily said that wasn't us and moved on, but they didn't.
Right.
You're right. That is one. That's why it's the gold star of examples.
And I'd like to lay this kind of thinking over the top of that and see, and maybe I'll do that in the coming days. So, so he finishes this thing up with some constant reminders, and I like these. Let me just give them to you. Think up, higher, broader, deeper, and always before you edit.
Yes.
Okay. Think to inspire, to motivate, to educate, and then forget the rest.
If you're doing that, you're on the right pathway.
You're on the right pathway.
Back to that.
Absolutely.
He makes very, very excellent points that are circular, which they should, right?
Right.
It all comes back to if your approach is correct, if you're doing things in the right way, the way you know you should, you're going to end up in the right place.
And if your vocabulary inserts civility and enables discourse, we're all the better for it.
Yes, put those feelings and emotions and concepts that are human in front of the business ideas.
Right.
Communicate with humans, because at the end of the day, that's who we're talking to. We're humans talking to other humans. Put your business jargon aside and think like a human, as you would have if you had to give bad news to another person. You would try to use empathy and use all of these positives.
Be civil.
Right. Exactly.
Be decent.
Politeness, etc. Even that, like politeness.
That's one of his words.
Don't blow in. 50 times in an hour on Twitter to say the same thing over and over again. That's rude.
Right. It is.
Understand your audience, understand your channels, understand your context. Put these high ideas ahead of you, and you should end up in the right place. And if anyone out there is listening to this, and if they've listened this far into the podcast, if they're this far in and they're like, man, this is a lot. This is kind of deep.
Right.
Well, it is. It's intentional. We're not talking to the interns here. We're talking to the folks who make decisions. And if it still feels a little bit over your head, do some of the research. Read Jim's article. Look at some of the references that Pritch has made today. We'll put some links in the podcast and on the video channel of different places you can find these things. And at the end of the day, just ask us to explain if there's any of this concept that you need to explain more. But it is conceptual. But if you start with your concept before you get into execution, if you understand your audience, you understand the situation, your intent is right, you're going to end up in a good place.
Well, and that's why I wanted to talk about this, because it is a little esoteric, right? And so
it's actually it's interesting. It's so simple,
right?
But it's that upper level of this that a lot of people probably weren't like, well, I wasn't thinking that. So, but once you lay it out the way you laid it out, I was like, this makes so much sense. I don't know why I wasn't thinking like this way already, but it takes someone to put it in front of you and say it in this way and put it in plain language before it hits all our brains and we all go, oh yeah, of course, let's do that.
Of course,
yeah.
It sounds simple, and it is in theory, but the practical application causes you to work a little harder, maybe. Mm-hmm. But today, especially in our society, decency and civility are held in contempt.
Which also means the people who value it will value it extremely high.
Yes.
If you demonstrate to people your willingness to go to extra levels to be decent, to be civil, to be trying to be a good member of your community, a good neighbor, as a citizen, a corporate citizen, if you will.
Right.
If you'll do those things, the people who appreciate that, it goes back to not just having a better opinion, will have a much higher opinion of you and your brand if you go this route. And the people who don't have any value for this, these shit talkers on and people who just want to start fights and trolls, if you will.
Right.
It doesn't matter. They're not our audience anyways. We're not talking to them.
Exactly.
So,
and you'll never convince them.
So when civility is in short supply, give it to them.
Give it to them.
Make that part of your process and creates extra value in your communication.
Yep, absolutely.
That's a win-win. That's
others.
A win-win.
Absolutely.
And you'll be able to sleep at night.
Soundly.
You'll be able to sleep like a baby. And here's one last tip for you folks. I say this a lot. I kind of look right into the camera on the video channel sometimes, and I'm like, folks, this is your job.
Right.
If you're listening to this, if you're going to apply these concepts, you work in communications, you work in PR. This is part of your process, or you're the leader of the company, and at some point, someone else is going to go, no. We don't have to do all that. We can go back to that negative side. We can omit some things. We can not talk about some things. We can avoid these questions, right? And they get in that negative side of things. This is your job to explain to them how this works, how this benefits, big picture, intermediate, the tactical execution, everything. And they're still like, we're not going to do that. We're going to go on the negative side of the scale. You really need to consider if that's the right employer for you.
Right, exactly.
Is that the right situation for you?
As I always told my students, you get one but sir, right?
Yeah.
And then aye, and carry on if that's the choice. But then you go back to the office and write a memo for the record. This is what so when it all blows up, you've got the evidence.
And if you're the boss,
right,
and your PR people, your communication people are coming to you and saying, we really need to handle this situation in this way, and here are the protocols we want to have in place, and here's our thought process, and here's how we are going to react in situations like this, listen to them. You've hired professionals for a reason.
Right.
Now get the hell out of their way. Listen to them. Don't try to force them down that negative path. Right. Don't try to force them off what they know to do. Let them do their thing. As the boss, it might create heartache for you, right? We talk about Johnson & Johnson, how much money they ate when they had to take all that Tylenol off the shelf.
Right.
You might have to do that. In the long run, your brand will survive.
It'll flourish.
So listen to the people who have the experience and are coming at it. They're on this pathway, this positive pathway, and let them take your brand on the positive path. Don't force them off of it because you're looking too much at the business side of things.
Well, because at the basic root of everything that we just talked about today is the business.
Yes.
Right? The business objectives.
For sure. And at the end of the day, a business is still a collection of people trying to do business with another collection of people.
Right.
I said it earlier, human beings talking and communicating to other human beings. Put the humans first. The business will happen the way it needs to happen if humans are connecting and communicating with humans the way we would all want to be connected and communicated with as humans.
Absolutely.
That's a lot of words in there. See what I'm saying there, folks?
Exactly.
So, if you're the PR professional, push, fight, scratch, get what you have to get done to make sure you're on the positive path.
Yep.
And stay off that negative path.
Yep.
And if you get on that negative path, maybe find a new place to work.
Right.
If you're the boss,
listen
to your professionals who are trying to keep you on that positive path. Don't focus too much on economics and what it does to the bank account. Think about what the reputation, we said earlier, 10 years can get wiped out in 10 seconds. Right. Don't go down that path.
Right.
Don't force your team to go down that path.
And if you've got a team that's pointing you in that direction, you probably need a better team.
That's a third option there, yes. If your PR team is telling you we could do these things that we've been describing as negative, and if you were listening this far, you agree that they're negative. If your PR team is telling you this as the boss, and you're listening to this podcast right now going, wait a minute.
Hold up.
I think my team is taking shortcuts. I don't think they're doing the right thing. Might need a new team.
That's
right.
Yep. So on that happy note, now I think it's absolutely critical today because, as you said earlier, civility and decency in our society today are in such short supply.
It's at a premium.
And a portion of our society thinks that business and corporations are bad.
Yes.
So I think you have an imperative to think about things like this going forward.
Well, we talk all the time, do business like it's 2021, not that it's 2019 or 2010 or 2000 or 1975 or 1932. Right? You can't do you used to be able to do certain things, you can't do that anymore. But this is how society is, how our consumers are, how our communication is, our technology, all of this. It is what it is. Right. So take your best practices, take your best thoughts, take your best intentions, and do your best with what you have until it changes, and then you figure it all out again. But if you're on that right path, it's going to work out.
And I'll tell you, from my years of experience, if you're doing these things, you're not going to get canceled. And if you do, everybody's going to see the sham that it is.
That's right. There are plenty of false cancellations that end up creating almost a cult following behind the person or the brand that was false canceled. So
exactly.
Stick to your guns, do what you know is right, and ride out the storm, whether you caused it or like Johnson & Johnson, they didn't cause it, and just do the right thing and everything's going to work out. And if it doesn't, businesses come and go. Businesses don't always succeed. Sometimes they fail. More often than not, they do. But it goes back to, you'll all be able to go home and go sleep at night.
Yep.
And you'll be able to find that next job or find a partner to start your next business or have something in the future if you keep your ethics in front of you and you always represent yourself in that way. Anytime someone goes, do I want to work with this person? Do I want to work with this group of people? Do I want to work with this business? Do I want to work with this brand? If you are doing these things, the right opportunities will come back to you.
There you go. Much better way to end the podcast.
Very positive. Listen, very positive. I can get positive when I need to.
Anyway, we hope that you found this enjoyable. If you didn't, let us hear about it. Give us your thoughts, because we can play with that. We can parry off of that. But mash that subscribe button, hit the bell, so that you know when stuff is coming. Be with us all the way down this journey, and we appreciate your time and attention. Until next time, ciao.
Good luck.
This has been the Golden Group Neo Marketing Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Tell a friend, leave a review, and engage with us on social media. Thanks for listening.